Good morning, Clinton College students, faculty, staff, alumni, and friends. My name is Litasia White. I am a sophomore from Irvington, New Jersey, majoring in biology. Welcome to the 12th and final installment of the Spring 2022 Virtual Beacon Forum series of Clinton College. The purpose of our Beacon Forum series is to bring together our campus community each Wednesday during the academic year from Wednesday 11 a.m. to 12 noon for a time of inspiration, education, and fellowship. Beacon Forum exposes our Clinton family to a variety of thought leaders, change agents, creatives, and innovators who embody one or more of our core values, which is scholarship, servant leadership, social change, and spirituality. Beacon Forum gives us an opportunity to have meaningful conversations with each other and professionals who are making a difference in our world. One of the hallmarks of our Beacon Forum series is the question and answer dialogue between our students and the viewing audience with our guest speaker. We encourage all of you, especially our Clinton students, to actively participate in today's Q&A segment led by our president, Dr. Lester McCoy. Share your questions and reflections in the comments today throughout today's event and especially during the Q&A. We want your input. We are delighted to have as our featured speaker today, Bree Newsome-Baz, activist, author, and filmmaker. On behalf of the entire Clinton College family, we say thank you to our friends from the community for spending part of your day with us. Be sure to follow all of our social media platforms for updates on future events, new academic programs, course offerings, and other activities. We hope you enjoyed today's broadcast.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you today asking for your guidance, wisdom, and support as we begin this meeting. Help us engage in meaningful discussions. Allow us to grow closer as groups and nurture the bonds of community. Fill us with your grace, Lord God, as we make decisions that might affect student, staff, faculty, and alumni and friends of Clinton College. Continue to remind us that all we do here today, all that we accomplish, is the pursuit of truth, for the greater glory of you, and for the service of humanity. We ask this thing in your name we pray. Amen.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmony of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening sky. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. So let us march on till victory is won. Let's go. March on. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the days when hope unborn and died. But yet with the steady beat, have not our weary feet come to the place for which our Father sighed. We have come over a way that with tears have been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughter, out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary, God of our silence, Thou who hast brought us thus far on the way. Thou who hast by thy might led us into the light. Keep us forever in the path we pray. Bless our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee. Bless our hearts drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand true to our God, true to our native land. Yeah, true to our God, true to our native land. Oh, da da da, true to our God, our native land. True to our God, true to our native land. True to our God, true to our native land. True to our God, true to our native land.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. That one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slavers, will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood? I have a dream.
Good morning, Clinton College, and guests who may be with us today. It is my absolute honor and pleasure to introduce our Beacon Forum guest speaker for today, Mrs. Bree Newsome Bass, an American filmmaker, musician, speaker, and activist from North Carolina, where she continues her work as an artist and grassroots community organizer. She is best known for her act of civil disobedience on June 27th, 2015, when she was arrested for removing the Confederate flag from South Carolina State House grounds in the aftermath of the Charleston shooting. The resulting publicity put pressure on state officials to remove the flag, and it was taken down permanently on July 10th, 2015. She previously served as the Western Field Organizer for Ignite North Carolina, an organization focused on building youth and student leadership. And she is one of the founders of The Tribe, a grassroots organizing collective created in the aftermath of the 2014 uprising in Ferguson that was instrumental in organizing the removal of South Carolina's Confederate flag in 2015. Her awards are numerous and include recognitions for her work as both an artist and activist, including a 2016 NAACP Image Award. Currently, Ms. Bass is focused on the issue of housing justice and remains a prominent public speaker on the topic of racial and economic justice, as well as the importance of the arts and social movements. Again, we want to provide a warm welcome from our Clinton family to a real trailblazer, a role model, and a change agent, Miss Bree Newsome Bass.
So shine before men, that others may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Let your light so shine before men, that others may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. and say all manner of evil against you for my sake. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and say all manner of evil against you for my sake. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and say all manner of evil against you for my sake. Blessed are ye when men shall revile you and persecute you, and say all manner of evil against you for my sake. Rejoice and be glad, for great is your reward. Rejoice and be glad, for great is your reward. Rejoice and be glad, for great is your reward.
Hi, good morning. It really is an honor and a pleasure to join you for the Beacon Forum series. Thank you for the warm introduction and the invitation. In addition to everything else that I do, I really, truly enjoy taking time to talk to students because I think that students in particular are very important to the history of social change. And that's one of the things that I'm going to speak about this morning. And so we have to talk about these things. We have to talk about what is going on around us and how it ties to the exact core values that you all lift up: scholarship, spirituality, social change, and service leadership. So I want to share some of my personal story and journey along those lines, and then kind of talk more broadly about what we can all do. And I have some slides to share with you to accompany my presentation. And then I look forward to the Q&A section. That's one of my other favorite things to do. So we have a lot going on right now in our society, obviously, right? And I hope everybody can see the slides. And that's what some of these images represent here. We're dealing with ecological disaster, issues of food insecurity, education, right? We have an ongoing attack on education. We're dealing with the pandemic. We're dealing with war on a global scale, policing, issues over democracy and voting, right? And sometimes it can feel a bit overwhelming. Like, how can we possibly meet these times? What can we do, right? But I want to tell you that for me, like when people ask, how do I stay motivated? How do I keep going? For me, it's actually my awareness that this is not the first time that we've dealt with any of these issues. Now we are dealing with, things at a different scale, at another level. I'm not, diminishing how extraordinary the circumstances are that we face, but people have faced extraordinary circumstances in the past. And we are where we are. We are here today. We are thriving to the extent that we are. We are pressing forward as we are because of people who recognized what was at stake in those times and took courageous action. And so that is what I personally draw upon. For me, like when I got to this moment of saying, yes, I want to be an activist, kind of on this conscious, as a conscious decision, I point to the summer of 2013 as like a key period in kind of setting me on the course that I'm on today. And there were a few events that happened that summer that were pivotal for me. One event, I visited the old Slave Mart Museum in Charleston, South Carolina. If you're not familiar with it, This is it's now a small building, a museum, but it was once part of a larger complex. And this is where people were actually sold and auctioned off. People who were brought on the slave ships through the ports of Charleston would be brought to this building and others like it, and then auctioned off and sold. And I visited that building with my family. Now, I've known, obviously, the history of slavery, not just from history books, but also just from my personal family history. My ancestors were enslaved on a plantation in Rembert, South Carolina. And this is a photo of them, Theodore and Minerva Diggs. So I grew up, hearing about this history, and particularly my great-great-great-grandmother, Minerva Diggs, who said that she would pray to God every night that her children would see freedom. And, I'm aware that I'm descended from her youngest child, who was the first and only child born into freedom. And so knowing that history, right, is one thing, but actually being in the physical building with my family and thinking about what would that be like if that were the last time I saw them. Like, we knew that when we left that building, we would go to separate places. It brought that history home for me in a different context. Another thing that happened in the summer of 2013, we had the attack on voting rights, this renewed attack on voting rights. So the Supreme Court of the United States struck down key parts of the Voting Rights Act. And North Carolina was one of those states where the legislature started trying to pass laws that were very clearly designed to target Black voters, student voters, because students are a powerful voting base in the state of North Carolina, people with disabilities, people with limited income. It was very clear. And so for me, what was so shocking about that moment was it really caused me to question how much I was taking certain rights for granted. I kind of viewed the Voting Rights Act as one of these things that was a settled matter from the civil rights era, that this was something people had marched and fought and bled and died for. And even though we still clearly had a ways to go in terms of fully achieving democracy in this country, this was one of the things that had been won. And so to realize how quickly something like that could be undone, I had to question, like, how was I showing up in this moment? I went out to a Moral Monday protest, which was organized by the North Carolina state chapter of the NAACP, which was being led by Reverend William Barber at that time. And every Monday they would march to the Capitol in Raleigh and stage a mass sit-in. Before that, I had never considered participating in any kind of protest where I might be arrested. But when I got there, I saw all of these young people, in particular, several of them had already been arrested. And I realized, when I thought about it, and I was asking myself the night before I participated in this, like, is this really something I should do? Like, what are the risks that go with this? I realized that I was only free today. I only had voting rights today because people had done this in the past. I thought especially about the freedom riders who you see pictured here, and you see John Lewis there in the lower right-hand corner. This was a collective of young people mostly who took this risk. They were violating the law when they got on Greyhound buses and went south and violated the rules of segregation. I mean, they were in violation of the law. But it was only because of that kind of organized civil disobedience and that willingness to face that kind of danger that we had made the progress that we had made so far. And so who am I to sit on the sidelines and simply watch as those rights are taken away, as everything that they fought for is taken away? And then, of course, the other really key incident in 2013, a lot of people cite this case as really kind of being the impetus for what we call the modern movement, or the modern iteration of the ongoing Black freedom movement. And that was the Trayvon Martin case. It was in that same summer that George Zimmerman was acquitted for the murder of Trayvon Martin. And I think for a lot of us, I know for myself, it really felt like our modern day Emmett Till. This is a young man who has been killed for no reason. We all know who killed him, and there's no accountability for it. In fact, what the entire system is telling us is that what happened to him is justified and legalized. And so very similarly to Emmett Till, whose lynching was one of the main starting points or inciting incidents of the 60s civil rights movement. Trayvon Martin's case really sparked this massive protest movement that we are still in the midst of today. One of the groups that really kind of formulated a response in the aftermath of that case was the Dream Defenders. This was a group of mostly Black and Latinx college and high school students in Florida. They actually staged a mass sit-in at the Florida State Capitol. And so I ended up traveling down to Florida from North Carolina with some other activists to visit with the Dream Defenders. And this was like another moment where I don't think I felt at that point in time that we were at the start of a new movement necessarily, but I did know that this was something different. And it just felt so inspiring to have this new sense of purpose. I think especially as young people, we really felt this sense of taking up the banner from previous generations and continuing this fight for freedom and justice and equality and liberation. 2 years later, about 2 years after that summer, we would learn that the Trayvon Martin case had not only inspired this new wave of activism among youth, but also the young white supremacist who would go on to enter Emmanuel AME Church in June of 2015 and murder 9 Black parishioners during a prayer meeting in this horrific manner. And of course, that also, right, is part of a continuum of violence, of attacks, particularly against the Black church, because of the Black church's historical role as a hub of community organization, as a place of spirituality and worship. And Dylann Roof, he targeted Emmanuel AME with that historical understanding. He meant for it to evoke that kind of terrorism and fear. Now, being, descended from people who have been in the Carolinas for hundreds of years, like every other Black American family, I'm sure, my family has its own history, personal history of experiencing this violence. I have a great uncle who was lynched in Goldsboro, North Carolina, so a white man could take his son's newspaper stand. My grandmother, who was born and raised in Greenville, South Carolina, has told me about her firsthand experiences of the Ku Klux Klan. And so we always understood what this symbol meant. This was not anything that was ambiguous. This was not anything where we weren't sure. There was any kind of mixed understanding of what this symbol meant. And I put here on this screen 2 contemporaneous quotes from the Civil War era, because obviously one of the things that came up in the aftermath of the shootings at Emmanuel AME was the Confederate flag and South Carolina's display of the flag and people debating what it meant. Well, here you have the co-designer of this flag, and he's saying, as a people, we are fighting to maintain the heaven-ordained supremacy of the white man over the inferior or colored race. And then on the right side, you see Alexander Stephens, who was the vice president of the Confederacy, and he says that the Confederacy's foundations are laid. Its cornerstone rests upon the great truth that the Negro is not equal to the white man, that slavery, subordination to the superior race, is his natural and normal condition. So that was the first iteration of the flag. And then, of course, in the aftermath of the Civil War, it reemerges as a symbol of anti-civil rights. And we all understood that this is not simply a flag or a symbol, but that it represents a system of violence, that it represents an organized, terror campaign where you knew that if you protested or if you attempted to vote, or if you even carried yourself as a person of dignity, as a Black person, you might face this kind of violent retribution. And that was exactly what it meant when it was raised in South Carolina as well. This particular flag was raised in 1962 at the height of the Civil Rights Movement. You had a lot of states across the South displaying the flag around the same time to basically symbolize that, yes, even though the South had lost the Civil War, white supremacy still rules the day here, right? And you will not enforce equality between the races as long as we are in power. The flag was there from 1962 until the year 2000, when after a lot of protest, South Carolina moved the flag from the dome of the Capitol to the lawn. But at that time, they wrote into the law that it couldn't be lowered for any reason unless there was a 2/3 approval in the State House. And they also designed it with an internal pulley system. You can kind of see in the image here, there's no rope on the outside of the flag. So it's very difficult. You couldn't just walk up to the flag and lower it with your hands if you wanted to. They also built a 4-foot tall spoked fence around the flag, so it wasn't even easy to get to the flagpole itself. And so that's where things were. That things kind of came to a standstill at that point. And that's why in the year 2015, we had this horrific situation in Charleston and this horrific visual where Clementa Pinckney, the pastor of Emmanuel AME, who was also a state senator, his casket was processed through the street of the Capitol. You can't see the dome in this particular image, but the United States flag, the state flag of South Carolina, had been lowered to half staff, but the Confederate flag is still at the top of the pole. And so it created this question of like, what does that say about the state of things, not just in South Carolina, but in the nation? And what does it mean that here we are debating whether or not to lower a flag of anti-civil rights instead of discussing what were the conditions that led a young person in his 20s to have so much racism and hatred in his heart that he could commit an act of terror like this. And so it was just devastating, I think, for all of us, particularly who are tied to this region, but even for people around the world. You know, in 1963, this is just a year after South Carolina raises its flag, Martin Luther King Jr. is jailed in Birmingham. And it's there that he writes his famous letter from a Birmingham jail, where he states the need for nonviolent direct action to force a crisis such that a community that has refused to negotiate is forced to confront the issue. And that was our exact thinking behind taking the flag down. I gathered together with a group of activists from both the Rock Hill area, actually, and from Charlotte, North Carolina. And we talked about, like, could we take the flag down as a demonstration of nonviolent civil disobedience, that we could really demonstrate the injustice that's represented by the flag being there in the first place, and also really show how the flag is a symbol of violence, and through taking it down, symbolize the need for us to dismantle such systems of violence. Half of us were mostly white, the other half were mostly Black and Latino. We had been working together over issues of policing and racism. The white people had been working together more over issues of like environmental issues. But we came together because we recognized that we all had literally skin in this game, that it wasn't just about a symbol, but it was about dismantling systems of oppression in all of their forms. As I mentioned to you before, because of the way South Carolina designed the flagpole and the display of the flag, the only way to get it down was for someone to scale to the top. So that's how that ended up becoming the method. And then we had to figure out, well, who can do that and who can risk being arrested? And so I volunteered to take on that role. And we felt that it would be very powerful to have a Black woman, someone descended from people who were enslaved in South Carolina, be in that role of taking the flag down, speak to its history, speak to why it was necessary for it to come down. And then we knew that someone else would have to be in the role of helping me over the fence and standing there as I climbed as a safety. And we decided that that role should go to James Tyson, a white man in the group, so that we could demonstrate the history of racial solidarity in the struggle against white supremacy, that this is a kind of collaboration that has been going on back to like the Underground Railroad and even in times before that. And we felt that it was important for people to see James get arrested alongside me, again, in demonstrating what is involved in dismantling systems of oppression. You will also notice, you might notice in this video that I'm about to show you, that as I was coming down the pole, James was holding onto the pole. And that's because as I neared the top and prepared to remove the flag, the police on the bottom actually threatened to tase me. There was a moment where they had 3 tasers trained on me. Had they followed through on that, they could have electrocuted me because I was attached to the pole. And James held onto it and said, like, if you do that, you will have to electrocute me too. And then the police de-escalated. So there's also a very real component. It's not just symbolic in terms of racial solidarity. We are dealing with a system that creates different outcomes based on our skin color and our ancestry. And there's no way that Black people on our own can dismantle such a system. It has to be a participatory project among everyone who recognizes what is at stake.
I know, sir. I'm prepared. Ma'am. 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 Start down off the pole. Ma'am. Come down off the pole. Off the pole. Ma'am. Ma'am. Go. You come against me with hatred and oppression and violence. I come against you in the name of God. This flag comes down today. Like to. The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is a stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? I'm trying to come down first. I'm gonna comply. I promise you. I'm coming down. I'm prepared to be arrested. But I can't. I said, when you pull your look, I can't get to it. That's one of those things. That's an important part. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Woo! He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside still waters. Look at that. Look the word of God. Where are they wrestling for? Thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me.
So when I removed the flag in South Carolina, when I, made the decision to do that, of course, I prayed over that for a few days before I did it. And I knew that there was enormous risk involved. I knew that I might be arrested, which I was. I knew that I might be injured, which I was. I knew that I might even be killed in the course of trying to do this, which I nearly was. But more importantly, what I knew was that the greatest risk was in doing nothing. And that's not just in terms of scaling the pole that day, but in terms of how I show up in the world as a conscious citizen of the world, right? And so as I look at everything that's happening around us, I ask myself repeatedly, what can I do as an individual? Not that I can do everything as an individual, but what can I do among all of the people who are taking actions? What can I do? What skills, what talents, what resources, what time can I contribute to a collective effort to better humanity? This is obviously a time of great controversy and turmoil. I wasn't terribly surprised when I looked up on January 6th and saw someone carrying a Confederate flag through the Capitol, because the reality is that we never really resolved a lot of these issues that are coming to a head now. But I want to point out to you that turmoil and controversy and, it doesn't necessarily mean that we should operate from a spirit of fear. In fact, I rebuke that. I think that these kinds of times of turmoil are actually the kinds of times where we have breakthrough and great change. And so that's the spirit that I choose to approach these times with, that yes, it is a time of trial, but it's also a time of faith, and it's a time to lean into our belief that things can get better. And so that's how I approach the work that I do. I really consider it a blessing to be able to work at a grassroots community level. I love doing that kind of work because I get to interact with everyday people who are just trying to make things better for themselves and their communities. And that's where you really get to see change happen. I think that we need to expand our understanding of what activism is. You know, I often get the question of like, how can I be an activist? You know, what kind of things should I do? But being an activist, I mean, baseline just means that you take action, and there's no limit to the front lines in this fight. I think that you're finding more and more that people who would not have previously considered themselves activists or even thought about engaging in activism are realizing that there are things to do wherever they are at. Here I'm showing you images of nurses who are, you know, fighting for better standards for themselves and for their patients. And I'm sure a lot of them, when they went into the nursing field, didn't think that that was one of the things they would end up having to do. I also want to caution us against trendy activism. You know, it's good in a way that everybody is, you know, wants to be an activist. Everybody is something and an activist because it's kind of like the trendy thing to do. But we want to be careful about like a superficial type of activism that only really exists for social media and likes and posing, right? These are serious issues. These are life and death issues. Like, it's not a game. You know, and I think the best way for us to measure whether or not we are engaging in meaningful, substantive action is to talk about how are we changing material conditions. So these are, you know, some of the conditions I highlighted at the beginning. Let's talk about what we're building towards, not just what needs to come down, but what are we building up? Because that dream, that vision, that is the fuel that ultimately keeps us going. Anger will get you started, but anger will burn out. And when you hit burnout, it is the vision, it is the dream, it is the faith and the belief in a better world that will ultimately carry you forward. So the last thing that I want to leave to you, and why I really like speaking to students, is because you are the inheritors of the world. You have inherited a certain set of conditions, right? You have inherited other people's visions for the world. But when we talk about what is this situation going to look like 50, 100 years from now, that's on you. You are the ones who are really in the place to determine what that future world looks like and what that future generation inherits. And in that realization, I hope that you find power, and I hope that you find the courage to stand wherever you are and take whatever action you can take, because together, that's how we build that better world. So thank you so much for inviting me to speak with you, and I really look forward to your questions.
Oh my God. Thank you, Bree Newsom Bass. What a powerful presentation. I'm moved every time I see you climb that pole, but I was literally brought to tears today. I'm not sure if this generation, I'd love for you to talk more about how we help people see the through line. I was very grateful that you started in Charleston. I too have South Carolina roots. My grandmother and them are from Kershaw County, Camden, South Carolina, and undoubtedly my ancestors came to these shores through the port of Charleston from Sierra Leone. Mm-hmm. And I'm a child of the civil rights movement, and because I went to school in Atlanta, I was sort of inundated in the legacy of civil rights. So I had sort of an understanding of it. And there were people that helped me to see that there is a connection in how white supremacy functions. You said something where you said that this country has not really resolved the issues post-Civil War. We are still fighting those battles in different ways. But I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how we can help our students understand that it is a systemic problem. Like, white supremacy is more than the abolition of slavery and the addition of civil rights. I mean, it's just so deep and profound. How can we, as you speak to these young people, how can we help them understand sort of the macro view and how we then, as you say, turn this into micro activism where we are?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, so for me, history has been like that's key. That's key. And I think what's important to understand, especially about what's happening right now, where there is such a concerted effort to suppress historical awareness, that should be your first clue about how key history is, right? So when we're talking, for instance, about the display of, the Confederate flag or Confederate monuments, that is really the result of a 20th century effort to suppress history of everything that happened before. It's like a deliberate miseducation campaign that went on in the 20th century so that people today are not really operating with the full awareness of what slavery was, right? Like if we were to get in a time machine and go back to, 100 years ago, you would probably still have some people that either were alive who had lived through slavery or they had relatives who were enslaved. So there was not the same kind of just generational disconnect. You get past a certain point where you don't have people who lived through a particular time. And we're actually starting to kind of approach that somewhat with the civil rights generation too, which is why it's so important that we don't lose that historical connection and that awareness of what came before us. We need to understand how the previous generation had to fight for voting rights so we can understand how critical this moment is that we are in right now. And so I think that the study of history is key. There's no way there's no way to really organize and mobilize without putting education at the center of it. And at the center of even that education, I would put history, because people that doesn't know, themselves can't have a future. And that's the whole point of trying to disconnect us from our history.
That is so true. Yeah, I mean, when I think about, let me say this before I go to the next question. For those of you who are viewing, this is a golden opportunity you have to engage with our speaker. You can put your questions in the chat and we will field them. We're going to go to a couple of our students in a moment and give them a chance to ask questions. I wanted to pick up on that last point. As we think about, for instance, I jotted down a note here. This white backlash, right? It has several forms. So some of it has to do with, reactions to elections, reactions to the taking down of a flag, a Confederate flag, the removal of the monuments to the Confederacy. But then it takes on very insidious forms. For instance, these movements across states to do away with critical race theory teaching, 1619 Project, all of these efforts. And I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about, I'm thinking about the connection of an institution of higher education, more specifically an HBCU. What can we do? What should we be doing to counter this anti-historical moment?
Yes, I think, one, I want to go back to the origins of HBCUs. Why were the HBCUs founded? I mean, again, the HBCU exists as a form of resistance to efforts to deny Black people education. And that's why HBCUs remain under, a constant attack. HBCUs have been targeted recently by white supremacists. HBCUs are chronically underfunded. And it's all because of the role that HBCUs play in educating Black people and being, centers for Black intellectualism for, 150 or more years now. And so I think that if we can come back to that original purpose and remind ourselves of that, and then figure out, so what does that say about how we need the HBCU to exist in our society today, in the community? How can the community pour into the HBCU, and how can the HBCU pour into the community in like a symbiotic relationship? I think the Reconstruction era is probably the most direct parallel to today. I used to think it was the Civil Rights era, like the 1960s era. I think it's actually more Reconstruction, because what we're looking at now is a power structure that is really trying to strike down the 14th Amendment, 14th and 15th Amendments. You know, the Civil Rights Movement was about trying to get the government to honor the 14th and 15th Amendments. Now we're at a point where they are just really trying to invalidate it completely. And so I think that if we look at that period of time, what were we doing during that time? Building institutions, creating our own historical curriculum, securing land and farmland and growing our own food. Like, those are a lot of the same things that we need to be looking at today.
I totally agree. I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you. So I'm going to call forward a couple of students. Anna, I'm going to ask Anna to come forward to ask a question of you.
Hi. Well, before I ask my questions, I just wanted to say that was very brave of you to do. You took the opportunity. When you see the opportunity, you took the risk knowing that it could potentially kill you. And that was very brave of you. And you played a vital role for us young adults here. And we look up to that. And that's what I admire about you.
Thank you.
And I do have a question. So do you think that the civil rights movement changed race relations in the U.S.? And do you feel that the progress has been made?
Yes and no. That's an excellent question. I think that there were gains, and I think that there were setbacks. So I think that, like, for instance, I think the Voting Rights Act was a tremendous victory. I think that the Civil Rights Act was a tremendous victory. I think that what we are dealing with now, though, is kind of like that backlash. And I mean, some people argue over like the characterization of backlash, that it's just like a constant forward press from white supremacy, which I think is true. But I do think we also have this pattern where we resist successfully. We kind of strategize a resistance. We make some progress or success, and then the system readjusts, right? And I think that's part of what happened there. I think that it's really important for us to recognize, though, that the majority of the things that were aims of the civil rights movement were not successful. Like, they didn't achieve it, because one of the kind of like myths that has been taught since that time is that, you know, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat, and Martin Luther King Jr. did the March on Washington, and then racism was over. And, you know, I'm so glad that that's over. Now we can go forward. And that's not true. You know, Martin Luther King was assassinated. We got some voting protection, but we still have had voter suppression ever since. The biggest success was really just the integration of public facilities, but even schools have really largely resegregated. It's just not mandated anymore. Policing hasn't changed, right? The conditions with housing really hasn't changed. I mean, if you go back and look at the main topics of the March on Washington, you're going to find that most of those things are still the top issues today. So I think that the civil rights movement is definitely something for us to study. It was tremendous in terms of its ability to mobilize among particularly impoverished Black people in the South. Like, if you look at like the Mississippi Freedom Movement, that really is something for us to continue studying today in terms of how they mobilize. But no, it was not over. And I think that the greatest setback for us today has been that misunderstanding that the civil rights movement achieved everything, and now there's nothing for us to do except be our best individual selves.
Great. Anna, thanks for that question. That was great. Great. Now we're going to call forward Latasia. Latasia, you have a question?
Yes. Well, I just have to say you're very brave for that, because I could never do that. I feel like I would just like, wait, going up. Because see, I have a fear of heights. I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I'm going to fall and die. But yeah, that was really brave of you. I'm very proud of you, and you're really an example to us.
Thank you.
But my question is, so what advice would you give to people like to keep going and pushing through and helping others for equality without getting arrested or having like people talk bad about them?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what I wanted to say to you, is that, you know, the good thing is everybody doesn't have to scale a pole. Like, that may not be, you know, but there may be the equivalent of that for you personally. And I do think that a lot of times when we think of activism, right, everybody's mind goes to being arrested, being tear gassed, something that makes headlines, something that makes history books. A lot of activism and organizing is meeting, organizing, knocking on doors, making phone calls. I mean, most of it is not quite as sensational as that. And we also need to expand our concept of what is revolutionary. One of the most revolutionary things the Black Panther Party did was the free breakfast program. Like one of the most revolutionary things was just feeding the children of the community. If we were to start community gardens where we are sharing food, if we were to secure land where everybody could have stable housing, that's revolutionary. So I really encourage everyone. It doesn't mean that you have to change even necessarily what you're doing or where you're at, because every field that you are in, I guarantee you there's something that you can do. The pandemic has shown how much medical racism is a problem. So if you're a nurse or a doctor or a healthcare professional or a scientist, there's change you can make there. The classroom is under attack. If you're an educator, so there really is no limit to the front line. And I think it's just a matter of just asking yourself, what's going on and what can I bring to the table? Because that's really, I mean, if you look at the history of movement, it's really about masses of people doing small actions that account to the larger change. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Latasia. Great question. So I want to thank you again, Bree Newsom-Bass, for what a powerful presentation and exchange. We say to all of our speakers, now you're officially a part of the Clinton College family. You're stuck with us. So we hope very soon to bring you back to campus in person, especially since you're so close.
Yes.
And you have some connections to Rock Hill. We would love to have you on our beautiful campus. I want to, as I said to you before we got started, I want to let you know how much we appreciate the work that you're doing, and we're praying for you.
Thank you.
I know personally how taxing it is to be an activist, and the kind of pressure that you're under. And I was so blessed, and I guess I got emotional when I heard you quoting Psalm 27, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear?" And God is certainly with you. And I pray that God will continue to go with you as you do this great work. We got to bring you back so you can talk about the tribe.
Yes.
And we got to talk about what we need to do to build up. We heard about what we got to tear down, but I want to hear more about what we can do to build up. So you got to come back.
Absolutely.
Come back.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Great. Thank you again. To all of our audience, thank you for sharing with us today in our Beacon Forum. This has been a special Beacon Forum, a great way for us to end the semester as we make our turn toward final exams and graduation. Thank you for being with us. I want to invite you to come Sunday for our virtual chapel service. Our good friend and adjunct professor, Quavon Newton of the Varick Memorial. I'm sorry, he came out of Varick Memorial. The Rush Temple AME Zion Church in Jamaica, New York will be our speaker, and we want you to join us at 5 o'clock Sunday afternoon. At this time, we're going to go to our announcements. We don't have time for alma mater, so go right to Dr. Morgan for announcements.
Good morning, Clinton family. So we have a lot going on here at Clinton College as we wrap up our spring 22 semester. And so today we have our pop-up registration fair for fall 2022. So all of our students, please grab your laptops and head over to the library, the Clinton College Library today from 1 p.m. to 6 p.m. Please go. It's very vital that you guys go over there and get a head start and get registered for the fall semester. This week is also Bear Fest. So we have our Bear Fest beginning on April 22nd. We have Fresh Friday on the Yard beginning at 12 p.m. And then we have a Silent Glow Party in the J.W. Martin Gymnasium at 8 p.m. that evening. On April 23rd, Saturday, we have our on-site admissions day hosted by the Office of Admissions. So please tell your friends and family and any high school students interested to come out on Saturday at 9 a.m. And then at 12 p.m., we have our barbecue on the Yard. Later on that evening at 8 p.m., we have a skate night in the library parking lot. And then on Sunday, April 24th, we have our chapel worship experience at 5 p.m., which will be virtual on this platform, YouTube or Facebook. And then in the evening at 7 p.m., we have Oxcore Awards in the J.W. Martin Gymnasium at 7 p.m. On May 4th at 11 a.m., we will have our honors convocation and award ceremony in the J.W. Martin Gymnasium. And then we will have our commencement week also beginning Wednesday, May 4th with our honors and awards day ceremony. On Thursday, May 5th, we have our career fair at 11 a.m. in the library. Then we'll have an alumni mixer at 6 p.m. also in the library. On Friday, May 6th, we have our baccalaureate services at 6 p.m. in the J.W. Martin Gymnasium. And then our President's Sneaker Soiree, which you don't want to miss, will be at 7:30 p.m. at the Break Field at Riverwalk. And then on Sunday, May 7th, we have our commencement at 1 p.m. in the J.W. Martin Gymnasium, and then a commencement reception in our cafeteria. Don't forget that we have group tutoring sessions every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. So if you need some additional support with tutor for your classes as we near toward the end of the semester, please come out on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. And students, please secure your spots for your enrollment and your housing for the fall 2022 semester. The enrollment deposit is $100 and your housing deposit is $150. So please make sure that you secure your spots, as our housing and spaces will be going quickly for the upcoming academic school year. And finally, we have our 2022 general SGA election weeks, which is currently going on. Yesterday, we had our presentation of candidates for those students who are running for Student Government Association for the 2022-2023 academic school year. And so if you missed it, you can go back and watch it. We had some great speeches from our candidates. You can watch it on Facebook or on YouTube just to get an update. Today at 7 p.m., we will have our SGA debate. So all of our candidates who are currently campaigning for student government will have their debate. So if you want to ask questions or just listen in, feel free to jump on to Facebook or YouTube at 7 p.m. today. Tomorrow, they will be hosting programs on campus and virtually. And then on April 22nd, we'll have our voting day. So all of our students, global, residential, and commuter students, will receive an email via their Clinton College email, and you'll be able to vote for your selection for SGA candidate positions from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. And then we will announce the SGA winners on Saturday during the barbecue here on campus. And so now I would like to bring up Miss Latasia White. Ms. Latasia White is a candidate for our SGA executive president, and I'll just give her a few moments to speak so that she can introduce herself once again as a candidate for SGA. Latasia?
Yes. Hello, everyone. For the people that missed the presentation yesterday, my name is Latasia White. I am a sophomore at Clinton College, and I major in biology. My campaign name is Bears with Attitude, and that stands for equality, peace, and change. So please vote for me. Please, I plan to change anything that you might have an issue with. We can make progress together. I plan for our future. I will always go for our core values. And I promise you that I will always be here for you. I'm a knock away. I'm a call away. So don't ever be shy. Don't ever be afraid. And we're going to make history. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Latasia. And next, we'll have another candidate for our SGA Executive President, Ms. Anna Kasor. Anna?
Hi, good afternoon, Clinton family. My name is Anna Hbcus. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. I am a senior majoring in Bachelor in Business and also Bachelor in Biology to become an orthopedic surgeon. I'm running to be an SGA president of class of 2022. And you all know that I would do anything to improve our school. Trust me, I know the school needs improvement and it needs more involvement. And that is why I am promising to get practical things done. And before I conclude my speech, I wanted to say that in my eyes, that the class president is not the boss. They are the voice representing the student body. Don't you want a good voice representing our grades? So don't forget, consider and vote for me, okay? And you won't regret it. Be a good sports and vote for me. Don't forget.
Thank you, Anna. And so those are two of our shining Clinton Golden Bears here And so we have some additional students who are running. I just want to mention their names. We have Mr. Elijah Rogers, who's running for Mr. Clinton College. Then we have Miss Patrice Berrios, who's running for Miss Clinton College. And then we have Mr. Gavin Gabriel, who's running for SGA Senate. And so please show some love to them and support them throughout this week as they campaign for SGA. So as we conclude our Beacon Forum on today, thank you for engaging with us and listening to us today. And I want to extend a thank you to Ms. Bree Newsom-Bass for that lovely presentation that she presented today, which was very insightful and impactful. And I hope that our community was able to take something away from that message on today. So you guys have a great day and a great week, and be blessed. Thank you.